Mark Ruffalo has been fired by Marvel Studios. His $500 million contract has been terminated. They're recasting the Hulk for Secret Wars and reshooting all his scenes in Spider-Man Brand New Day with a completely new actor starting in the next couple months. At least, that's what a bunch of clickbait pages run by absolute morons want you to believe right now. And honestly, the fact that so many people are falling for this absolute garbage without even questioning it for 2 seconds is genuinely frustrating and shows how easily misinformation spreads like wildfire in this fandom when people don't bother using their brains. So let's break down exactly what's actually happening here. Why these ridiculous rumors keep popping up every few months, targeting Mark Ruffalo specifically, and what the actual legitimate truth is about his future as the Hulk in the MCU moving forward. This whole ridiculous mess started after Mark Ruffalo attended the Golden Globes, recently wearing a pin that simply said "Be good," and proceeded to make some comments criticizing certain political figures and controversial policies that a segment of the population absolutely did not appreciate whatsoever. Now, look, whether you personally agree with his politics or not is completely irrelevant to this entire discussion, and frankly, I don't care what your political opinions are, but what happened immediately after his comments is where things went completely off the rails and turned into this circus. A page called Marvel News, which sounds super official and legitimate but is actually run by people with absolutely zero credibility or connections to the actual industry, posted that Mark Ruffalo had been fired by Disney and Marvel Studios effective immediately. They claimed his $500 million contract was terminated and that Marvel was already actively hiring a brand new actor to reshoot all of his scenes from Spider-Man Brand New Day. $500 million. Actually stop and let that number sink in for a second. That would make Mark Ruffalo's supposed contract 25 times larger than Robert Downey Jr.'s entire MCU deal across multiple films spanning over a decade. Does that make even the slightest bit of logical sense whatsoever to anyone with a functioning brain? Of course it doesn't. But here's the problem. The damage was already done before anyone could think critically. The post spread like absolute wildfire across social media platforms. People were sharing it mindlessly, commenting on it like it was breaking news, and other equally clueless pages were reporting on it like it was confirmed official information straight from Kevin Feige himself. And then, only after getting absolutely roasted and torn apart in the comments section by people with functioning brain cells who actually bothered to question the source, did Marvel News quietly and sneakily update their post to add the word rumor at the top. But by then, it was way too late. The false information had already infected dozens upon dozens of other pages run by equally incompetent people who never bother fact-checking a single thing before hitting the post button. Here's what actually happened in reality and why this entire situation is so completely absurd when you break it down logically. Mark Ruffalo recently confirmed in an interview that he's not appearing in Avengers Doomsday. That's a confirmed fact. He explicitly stated he's open to working with Marvel again in the future if the opportunity arises. But he genuinely isn't sure what that looks like right now, or what Marvel's plans are for the Hulk character. That's it. That's literally all he said in the interview. He gave a pretty standard, vague Hollywood answer about his future with the studio. But scoopers and rumor pages took that completely reasonable statement and ran with it at full speed, claiming his contract must be up and Marvel is actively recasting the Hulk for Secret Wars and everything beyond. These are the exact same people who swore up and down just months ago that Hulk wasn't going to be in Spider-Man Brand New Day at all because he hadn't been spotted on set yet and there were no leaks confirming his involvement. And then, when Mark Ruffalo was actually confirmed to be in the movie, what did these pages do? They pivoted immediately without any shame whatsoever and said, well, plans must have changed during production and Marvel added him later. So let me get this completely straight and make sure I understand the logic here. When Mark Ruffalo isn't confirmed for a project yet and then later gets added, that means plans changed and Marvel decided to include him after initial planning. But when he's not confirmed for Secret Wars right now, that suddenly means he's been fired, replaced, and will never play the Hulk again? Do you see how absolutely ridiculous and inconsistent that logic is when you actually examine it? Using that exact same reasoning and applying it consistently, I could say right now that Ryan Reynolds is completely done playing Deadpool forever because he hasn't been officially confirmed for Secret Wars either. Hugh Jackman must be retired again as Wolverine because we don't know for certain if he's in Secret Wars. In fact, using this absurd logic, let's just assume every single actor who hasn't explicitly confirmed their involvement in Secret Wars publicly has been fired from the MCU entirely and will never appear again. That's essentially the level of complete stupidity and lack of critical thinking we're dealing with from these rumor pages. And honestly, I genuinely need to address why Mark Ruffalo specifically keeps getting targeted over and over again with these fake firing rumors and manufactured controversies. It's happened at least 5 or 6 times over the past few years at this point, and it's always the exact same predictable pattern every single time. Mark says something political that pisses off a certain vocal segment of the fan base who disagree with his views. Within literally days, sometimes even hours, rumors start circulating on social media that he's been fired or replaced, or that Marvel is unhappy with him. Clickbait pages immediately pick up these rumors because they know it'll generate massive engagement and ad revenue. People who already didn't like Ruffalo for his political stances eagerly share the rumors because they desperately want them to be true and see it as validation. And then reasonable people like myself have to waste our valuable time debunking obvious nonsense that should never have been taken seriously in the first place. Mark Ruffalo has become this weird lightning rod in the Marvel fandom where he gets blamed for literally everything people don't like about the Hulk's direction in the MCU, regardless of whether he has any creative control whatsoever. He's become like a lesser version of Kathleen Kennedy at this point, where no matter what happens or what decisions are made, there's always a subset of fans ready to blame him personally, even when it makes zero logical sense. The Hulk doesn't get enough screen time in a particular movie. Somehow that's Mark Ruffalo's fault, even though he has no control over the script or runtime. People don't like how the character was handled in She-Hulk. Clearly, Mark Ruffalo is personally responsible, even though he's literally just an actor, following the script and direction he's given. The Hulk's power levels seem inconsistent across different films. Must be Mark Ruffalo's doing somehow? It's completely exhausting, and it's utterly detached from reality, but it keeps happening over and over again in this never-ending cycle. Now let's actually talk about what we genuinely know as confirmed facts versus what's pure speculation and rumor mill garbage. Mark Ruffalo has confirmed he's not in Avengers Doomsday. That's a fact we can verify, but not being in one specific movie doesn't automatically mean he's done with the MCU forever, or that Marvel has fired him. There are plenty of completely logical reasons why the Hulk might not appear in Doomsday, specifically that have nothing to do with Mark Ruffalo's employment status. Maybe the story Kevin Feige and the Russo brothers have planned simply doesn't require the Hulk character for that particular narrative. Maybe his character arc is intentionally being saved for Secret Wars, where it'll have significantly more impact and emotional weight. Maybe Marvel looked at the already massive cast they're assembling for Doomsday and realized they just couldn't fit every single character into one movie without it feeling overstuffed and unfocused. None of those completely reasonable explanations require Mark Ruffalo being fired or the role being recast. They're just standard storytelling and production decisions that happen on literally every major film. And as for the reports circulating that Marvel is allegedly planning to recast the Hulk going forward after Doomsday for all future appearances, where exactly is that information actually coming from when you trace it back? Rumblings from insiders, according to these pages posting the rumors. Okay, which specific insiders are they referring to? What's their proven track record of accurate information? Do they have any actual verifiable connection to Marvel Studios, or are they just making educated guesses based on Mark Ruffalo's vague comments and public statements? Because from where I'm sitting and analyzing this situation objectively, this looks like classic rumor mill garbage, where someone takes a tiny piece of legitimate real information, specifically that Mark Ruffalo isn't in Doomsday, and then extrapolates it into a completely unfounded and exaggerated claim that he's being replaced entirely and will never play the character again. Let's also address the elephant in the room here, which is that Mark Ruffalo is currently 60 years old at this point and has been playing the Hulk consistently for well over a decade, spanning multiple films and shows. At some point in the near future, yes, Marvel will probably need to either recast the character with a younger actor or retire him from the MCU entirely, depending on what direction they want to take. That's not a controversial statement. That's just acknowledging reality and how the film industry works. Actors age, contracts eventually end, and characters either get passed on to new performers or written out of the story completely. But there's a massive fundamental difference between acknowledging that eventual reality as a possibility down the road and claiming that Marvel has already fired him right now, terminated a completely fictional $500 million contract that never existed, and is currently in the process of reshooting an entire movie without him. One is a reasonable, mature discussion about the future of a beloved character and how Marvel might handle that transition when it eventually becomes necessary. The other is straight up misinformation and lies designed specifically to generate clicks, ad revenue, and outrage from people who are too lazy to fact-check anything. And what's genuinely frustrating about this whole situation is how many people fall for it without even questioning the source for 2 seconds. Marvel News posts something with absolutely zero credible evidence backing it up and no legitimate sources cited, and suddenly half the fandom is treating it like confirmed fact straight from Kevin Feige's mouth. Nobody bothers asking the basic question of where this information actually came from or whether it makes any logical sense when you think about it critically. They just see a headline that aligns with what they personally want to believe or validates their existing biases, and they immediately run with it and share it everywhere. So here's my actual honest take on what's probably happening with Mark Ruffalo and the Hulk moving forward into the future of the MCU. I think Mark genuinely doesn't know what his future with Marvel looks like right now on a concrete level, which is exactly why he gave such a vague and non-committal answer about being open to working with them again if the opportunity presents itself. His contract situation with Marvel is probably complicated at this stage after so many years, and Marvel likely hasn't made final decisions decisions yet about exactly how they want to use the Hulk character in Secret Wars and whatever comes beyond that in the next saga. That's not remotely the same thing as being fired or replaced. That's just literally how the film industry works when you're dealing with massive ensemble movies and actors who have been with a franchise for over a decade. There are negotiations, discussions about future plans, and creative decisions that need to be made by multiple parties before anything gets finalized. I also think there's a very real possibility that the Hulk's role in the multiverse saga is intentionally being scaled back somewhat, so other newer characters can have their moment to shine and develop properly. We've actually had tons of Hulk content relatively recently between the She-Hulk series on Disney+, his significant appearance in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and now apparently his confirmed role in Spider-Man Brand New Day. Maybe Marvel genuinely feels like they've told most of the major stories they wanted to tell with this specific version of the character for now, and they're perfectly okay with him taking a backseat for a bit while newer heroes get developed and established. That doesn't require firing Mark Ruffalo or recasting the role immediately. It just means being strategic and thoughtful about when and how you use certain characters to maximize their impact. But ultimately, none of us actually know with 100% certainty what's happening behind the scenes at Marvel Studios, except for the people who actually work there in positions of creative authority. And honestly, that's completely fine. We don't need to know every single minute detail about every actor's contract status, salary negotiations, or future plans years in advance. What we desperately do need is for people to stop mindlessly spreading obvious misinformation and treating random rumor pages with zero credibility, like they're legitimate news sources with actual industry connections. If a page posts something without any credible source backing it up, and the claim sounds absolutely ridiculous on its face, like a $500 million contract being terminated or reshoots happening in a matter of months, maybe don't immediately believe it and share it with everyone you know without questioning it first. Use some basic critical thinking skills. Ask yourself if the information actually makes logical sense when you examine it. Check if other reliable outlets with proven track records are reporting the same information. And if the only source is some random page on social media that has a well-documented history of posting clickbait nonsense and made-up rumors, maybe just ignore it entirely and move on with your life. The Mark Ruffalo firing rumors are a perfect example of how quickly false information spreads in fan communities when people don't bother fact-checking anything and just believe whatever aligns with their existing biases. And honestly, it's getting really old at this point. Mark Ruffalo is still the Hulk until Marvel Studios officially announces otherwise through legitimate channels. He's not in Doomsday, but that doesn't mean he's been fired or replaced. And anyone claiming they know for absolute certain what's happening with his contract or future MCU appearances beyond what he's publicly stated is either deliberately lying for engagement or mindlessly repeating lies they heard from someone else. That's the reality of this situation. Everything else is just noise.